Greetings, embers, newbies, and the peekaboos. Welcome to Back to Ashes. I am your host, Phoenix. Before we begin, if you enjoy the way I narrate these stories, a subscribe, like, comment, or share would be highly appreciated. I would also like to take a moment and acknowledge the elite members of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for your continued support, for you all are the pillars on which this channel stands. You have my deepest of gratitude. If you would like to become a member of the channel or would like to buy me a coffee, those links can be found down below. Without further ado, it is now time to go back to Ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled A True Scary Collection. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. Disclaimer, this video is for educational and entertainment purposes. Moving in with family a pretty long time ago, I overheard a girl from next door one night crying on the phone hysterically. She kept repeating, "But she's a murderer. She killed someone." Me, kind of getting freaked out, let out a cough, and the girl suddenly went quiet and headed inside. I woke up the next day, and on my way out, noticed the house looked like no one was home. But there was an extension cord hanging out of the window, and the front door was slightly open. About a week went by, and my mom asked if I had seen the neighbors at all because their door had been open the whole time. When I said no, we decided to go knock on the door. We just gave it a push since it was already open. We were surprised when we seen the house was completely trashed. We only walked into the kitchen and saw the same mess before we got out. On the way out, me not wanting to freak my mother out, I told her I was going to look around the yard and would meet her back home. I actually noticed the extension cord leading to a shed in the backyard. When I got there, I got a chill down my spine when I found myself staring at two fridges, one wrapped with duct tape. The one wrapped happened to be the one hooked to the cord. I had a buddy coming over while this was going on. I told him what was going on and had him follow me back there. We opened the first fridge and found a bunch of old frozen pizzas. The second one took a while because it was wrapped, but when we finally got it open, we found a big blue plastic bag with another bag inside of it. It ended up being some type of meat. It didn't look like anything nefarious, but definitely wasn't normal. I wasn't sure what to make of it, as we didn't find anything really crazy. We left everything alone and left. Eventually, a crew came in and cleaned the place out, and a new family moved in sometime later. It was just odd to me and just thought of it after reading another story. I hope those people were all right. This had happened to me about 6 years ago. I was doing my usual routine of walking around town for a few hours, as I enjoyed walking, and I was getting my steps in for the day. I'd always start from my house, walk around town for a few hours, then turn around and head back home. I'd always go walking around noon or an hour or two later at the latest. My walks would start at 11 a.m. at the earliest or 2 p.m. at the latest. This day in particular, I had a bunch of things to do, so I was unable to go out walking before noon. I'd eventually finished up everything that I needed to do, but it was already in the mid to late afternoon. I checked the time and it was almost 3 p.m. I debated whether or not if I should go walking or if I should go tomorrow instead, since I had nothing going on until the next day. I said fuck it and decided to go for a walk, but I told myself that I had to cut it short because I didn't want to be out after sunset, since it would be pretty cold out at night. I got dressed and headed out to get my walk in for the day. Fast forward almost 3 hours later. I looked at my phone and checked the time. saw that it was almost 6 p.m. and started to make my way back home. I had a bit of a problem, which I was about 6 miles away from my house, and it would take me about an hour and a half or more to get there. The sun had fully gone down, and there was only a faint orange glow in the sky from it. The night sky had begun to take over, and the air was turning cold. I began to make my way back home and had picked up the pace, as I didn't want to be outside when it was cold. I was about 2 miles away from my home and thought I was in the clear, when I was wrong. I passed by a convenience store, which I noticed a man sitting on the side of the building smoking a cigarette. The man looked to be in his early to mid-30s, wore a black hoodie, black pants, and black shoes. I saw him turn his head towards me, and he gave me a blank stare. I thought nothing of it and just ignored it. I turned around a few moments later and saw he had gotten up from his spot and began walking the same direction I was going. I kept checking behind me, often to see if he would turn down another street, but he never did. After several minutes of him walking the same direction as me, I hear the man start yelling, "Hey!" He then started saying other stuff to try to get my attention, which I ignored. Right after that, I heard him yell, "What the fuck?" at me in an angry tone. I sped up and didn't dare to look back at that point. I texted my dad and explained that there's some creepy guy following me and how he was yelling at me. My dad replies, asking me how far I am, and I say about less than a mile away. He replies back to keep walking and don't worry, and that he'll come and get me in the next few minutes. I turned behind me to see if he's still following as he stopped yelling, and he was, unfortunately. I was 3/4 of a mile away from my house, and I thought about just running there. At the same time, I didn't want this guy to follow me and find out where I lived. I was about to turn down the street I lived at when something told me not to. I texted my dad and told him I passed the street and to go the other way, which he replied with, "Okay." I kept going forward, passing the street, when all of a sudden, I heard some kind of frantic noise. I turned around only to see, to my horror, that the guy put his hood up and was sprinting straight forward towards me. Without hesitation, I bolted straight ahead and ran across the street. I kept running for what felt like hours until I saw a pair of headlights coming down the street. I waved my arms like a madman, hoping they would see me. Thankfully, they did, and the car stopped. I got closer and saw it was my dad. I looked behind me, only to see that that man who was chasing me had somehow disappeared. I got in the car and explained everything to him. He said that he was going to drive down the street to see if he could find the man and would confront him. We drove down the street, only to see nobody walking on the sidewalk or hiding behind the bushes. There was no sign of anyone being out, as the streets were empty. From that day on, I never go out walking after 2 p.m., and I since then carry a pocket knife with me wherever I go, walking for my own safety and protection. I don't know what that man would have done to me had he caught me, and I don't think I ever want to know. This happened approximately 10 years ago, around 2015 to 2016. I was living with someone at the time who worked an opposite schedule as me. He worked graveyard and I worked during the day. So when I was getting up to get ready to leave for work, he was just coming home. On the nights during the week, I obviously would be at home by myself. One night during the week, I was feeling especially lonely, and my favorite toy unfortunately broke and died. So I decided to drive downtown to the 24-hour adult store to buy another one. The town I live in is a mid-sized suburban town filled with mostly residential areas. The main downtown area was essentially one small area on the way to the freeway. My apartment was 10 minutes away. I pulled into the parking lot behind the adult store. The parking lot was dark and had multiple entries all around that led to the bars and restaurants as well as the store. After parking my car, I walked towards the entrance of the store, which was at the street. To do so, I had to walk towards the driveway I came in to park. Upon walking to the entrance, I noticed a man standing by himself smoking a cigarette. It was 1 a.m. and not normal just to see only one person standing by themselves, though I figured he was one of the patrons from one of the bars on the block taking a cigarette break. As I walked past him, he said, "Hi," to which I responded with a quiet hi back, but didn't make eye contact with the man. Upon passing him, I had a better look at his appearance. He had a shaved head with a long white t-shirt with shorts hanging past his knees. He had a pair of sneakers accompanied with some tube socks that covered his shins. This is not unusual to see in my city, but I was more concerned that he was sitting by himself and instantly took an interest in me as I walked past him. After passing him and continuing to walk to the store, I saw out of the corner of my eye that the man proceeded to follow behind me. When I say follow, I don't mean he coincidentally was walking behind me. He immediately followed right behind me as soon as I passed him, making a point to maintain the same walking speed. I did not know this man's intentions, but a man by himself that late at night is a recipe for trouble. As I looked down the dark and empty street, I weighed out my options of where to go. Initially, I thought, keep walking so he doesn't know you're going to the adult store. But since it was 1 a.m. and there was no one on the street, I thought that to be more dangerous. Then I thought, just go in one of the bars. But then I thought that would give him an easier introduction to approach me. So then I realized my best bet was to continue into the store where I know was well lit and people who could see me. I proceeded to shop for what I came there for. The man entered the store behind me, but hung out at the front of the store, so not to look like he was following me around. He wasn't even pretending to shop. He literally just sat at the front waiting. As I was shopping, I heard the man make a sound, to which I ignored. He wasn't getting the message. He continued making that sound as I continued to shop without noticing. Eventually, I walked up to the cashier, who was completely oblivious to what was going on. I tried to whisper to the cashier, "Do you know that man, or does he work here?" The cashier asked me to repeat what I was saying. I asked again, but still spoke in a quiet voice. Not understanding my attempt to be discreet, the cashier responded, "I can't hear you. Say that again?" At this point, I felt my cover was blown. So, in a more normal tone, I told the cashier the man in front followed me from outside and won't leave me alone. I explained my car was parked in the lot behind the store and I didn't feel comfortable going to my car. The cashier said okay. The cash wrap area was an enclosed square-shaped counter to maintain distance between the staff and the customers. The cashier walked to the front by where the man was, and from behind the counter, told the man to leave. He then came up and assured me he told the man to go away, though the man did not, in fact, go away. He continued to stay there, giving that I didn't want him to follow me to my car. I stayed in the store and pretended like I was still shopping, even though I already found what I came there for. I would occasionally glance to the front to see if the man was still there. He was. I kept going up to the cashier, explaining the man hasn't left. So he went back to the front to talk to him. I heard the cashier say, "Enough already. Leave the store." While he was doing this, I went to the far back end of the store to remain out of sight. By the time I circled back to the cashier, I noticed the man was no longer in the store. The cashier said that he repeatedly and more assertively told the man to leave. He said the man claimed he didn't understand English. The cashier then said he pulled a baton he kept under the counter for protection, held it over his head, and asked the man, "Do you understand this?" To which the man finally left the store. I made my purchase, but was still worried about walking to my car, even though I was parked in one of the first spaces when you came through the driveway. The cashier pointed at a small TV behind him that had 4 angles of CCTV footage. He assured me that the man was gone, and if I saw him, to come back in the store. He also said he will see when I walk to the car. Even though I would have felt more comfortable with him walking me to the car, I understood he was by himself and couldn't leave the store unattended with customers. After making my purchase, I sped walked to my car. I always have my keys at the ready when walking to my car, so I promptly pressed unlock on the car remote, got in the car, placed my bag of purchases on the passenger seat, and proceeded to start my car. Once my car turned on, I turned off the e-brake, put the car in reverse, and while putting on my seatbelt, I looked to my side view mirror to back out. It was at this point that I saw the same man in the side view mirror, full-on speed walking right to my driver's side door. I was driving an Accord at that time, and the model automatically locks all the doors when you take the car out of park. As soon as I saw him, I hit the gas and violently pulled out of my parking space. I pulled out so fast it startled him and stopped him dead in his tracks. He was now standing right next to my driver's side door as I continued to pull out. I gave him the most serious dead stare I could, because I know most predators play off the fear of their victims. The stare must have worked. As soon as he saw me pull out, while staring at him, he turned his head back to the driveway entrance and proceeded to walk back to where he was standing. He had a look of defeat on his face. My face, however, was overcome with relief. I pulled out of the parking lot and took myself back home. I felt a bit of shame being by myself, going out so late. I did tell my boyfriend about the incident when he came home at 6 a.m. He also concurred me going out that late by myself wasn't the smartest thing. I'm no longer with that person, but still live in the same town. Though I never leave my home for anything past 9 o'clock anymore. While the town I live in isn't the most dangerous, there still is enough crimes that occur here. It's also not considered the safest. So, to the man who decided to follow me at 1 in the morning with sinister intentions, let us not ever meet again. Four years back, I had to move from a major East Coast city in the US to London for work. I had spent over 7 years in this city and was emotionally jolted by this move, as I was in a 3-year relationship and lived happily with my then girlfriend. On my last day there, I went with my girlfriend to my favorite sunset spot in the city. It felt like a fitting end to my chapter there, as my girlfriend and I had spent countless evenings walking there, and this spot was truly my happy place. As the sun dipped under the horizon, my girlfriend and I decided to get an Uber back home to spend our last night in our apartment that we had so painstakingly put together. As I ordered the Uber, I realized that I had accidentally ordered it a few blocks away, and the cab was just a few minutes away. I grabbed my girlfriend's hand and started running towards our cab. While running, I noticed that another woman, short in her early 30s and well put together, was also running behind us. While running, I joked to my girlfriend that she might also have ordered the cab to the wrong spot. However, we pass a couple of intersections and we are still unable to lose her. At the next intersection, the moment it goes green, I tightly gripped my girlfriend's hand to prevent her from sprinting. The woman takes 2 steps ahead and realizes that we are not moving. As she turns back to us, I ask her, "What do you want?" She responds almost immediately that she needs to get in the cab with us because her life is in danger. Her hand is in her purse, and she is carrying a bag from T-Mobile in her other hand. Knowing that my girlfriend was going to be alone in that house for a few days after I left, I refused her request. I told her that I am happy to walk her to a safe space or even a police station if needed. But no way in hell was she finding out where my girlfriend lived. She kept on pleading, noting that her life is in danger and everyone is trying to get her. All this while she was looking around for someone in an extremely jerky way. I stood there on the side of the road for a good 10 minutes, refusing her request to come in the Uber with me. To make it crystal clear to her, I even canceled the Uber I had ordered in front of her. Her hand in her purse and the fact that my girlfriend was going to be alone meant that I was in no mood to try my luck. After 10 minutes or so, she agreed to me getting her own Uber on my phone. I asked her for her number to check in on her. Once she arrived, and she removed a new iPhone box with a Post-it note from her T-Mobile bag and read the number from the Post-it. This was the only time her hand had come out of her purse, and she slid it right back in after she read the number out to me. Ultimately, she put her location on a random suburban street by the woods, and I walked her to the Uber. After getting a notification that she had reached, I dropped her a message to ask her if she was okay. I did not hear anything in return. What could explain this strange interaction? Is this some sort of a scam? What's she trying to achieve? Was I being too hard on her? I was just filled with emotions and did not want to put my girlfriend in any danger. For some context, this happened when I was in high school and was more prone to foolish suggestions. I will never be anywhere near that board again and do not recommend anyone else play with it. It was supposed to be a casual night. We were happy to be done with school for a while and enjoy summer vacation. Around midnight, someone mentioned the Ouija board. "Nah," I said, shaking my head. "I've heard enough stories to know it's not something you mess with." But they kept pushing, joking that I was too scared. I laughed it off, but in the back of my mind, a faint unease prickled. It felt like something I should not be doing, like crossing some invisible line. But eventually, I caved, part of me also excited. We set up the board on the coffee table and dimmed the lights, half for effect and half because we thought it was all just a game. We settled around the board, fingers on the planchette, exchanging nervous glances. I could feel that same prickling sense of caution, but I ignored it. "It's just a board game," I told myself. "Is anyone here?" my friend asked, her voice low, almost mocking. Nothing happened at first. We all looked at each other, grinning. But then, just as we were about to give up, the planchette slid, slow and steady, toward yes. We froze, half expecting someone to laugh and admit that they were pushing it, but no one did. "So, what's your name?" my friend asked, trying to keep up the joking tone. But I could hear the edge in her voice. The planchette didn't move this time, just stayed still as if it were waiting. After a long silence, I asked, "Do you want us here?" I don't know why I asked that. It just slipped out, and as soon as I said it, I wished I hadn't. Slowly, the planchette slid to N-O. A chill settled over the room. The kind that feels like it's creeping in from some deep, cold place. One of my friends laughed nervously, saying it was probably just a joke or one of us messing around, but nobody looked convinced anymore. I suggested we stop, but someone else brushed it off, saying we were almost done. So we kept going, feeling a little braver again, asking questions and joking around. But the atmosphere stayed heavy, like the room was closing in on us. "All right," I finally said, ready to end it. "Do you want us to leave?" The planchette shot to yes so quickly it made us all jump. We all pulled our hands back, laughing nervously. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that maybe we'd done something we shouldn't have. As we started cleaning up, we noticed that one of the candles had gone out without us noticing, and the air felt colder than it had before. We laughed it off, but the jokes fell flat. And when I looked into my friends' faces, I could see that they felt it too. That sense of wrongness hanging over us, silent and heavy. The weirdest part? For weeks after that night, I kept feeling like I was being watched. I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder, seeing shadows that didn't quite make any sense. It was probably nothing, I told myself, just my mind playing tricks. But deep down, I knew something had shifted that night, like a door we couldn't see and open, and something or someone had been watching, waiting, and maybe, just maybe, it was still there, lingering on the edge of the light. This happened a few years ago, a little less than a year after COVID started, but I was talking about it with some friends, and looking back, the story seems like a good scary story now. It's a little long with me listing the red flags, so just go to the bottom 3 paragraphs if you just want the altercation part. I got a promotion at work, but had to move several hundred miles away from family and friends to a new area. The job paid pretty well, but I got scammed by some moving brokers and had a medical incident that gave me a lot of bills to take care of. Given that it was hard to make friends when lockdown was still happening, I decided to get a weekend job to pay down the bills faster, since I didn't have much to do outside of my main job. Ended up hitting it off with a guy who was a manager at a local paint store. He said weekends were pretty light, since most of their business was during the week, and weekends were mainly for people who weren't painters for a living or people picking up orders. So, most of the time, I just played my Switch, read, and watched stuff. I was usually either by myself or had one other person there with me. If another person was there, I was usually out front, and he was in the back counting inventory or playing his Switch or watching stuff. One day, a guy pulls in an interesting vehicle, which was a school bus spray painted with white primer and no plates. I didn't think much of it at that time because in that field, you see a lot of weird vehicles people work from, such as cars with multiple donuts instead of tires, minivans with missing doors, or cars that were 90% rust and 10% hope and duct tape keeping it together. So this guy comes in and is going through our color options and starts asking me a bunch of questions while he's doing so. I tried asking him what he was painting or what general color he was looking for, but would just say he's doing a paint project for a client. He didn't say a certain color, and he was looking at every color in our book, which seemed odd since it was for a client. I imagine they would have at least given a broad color like red or gray for him to get. He then says, "I do good work, which is why I'm a millionaire," and gave me his card. The card seemed weird, felt just like a regular cardstock and was misshapen too, as if he printed them at home and cut them himself, which he probably did. He kept asking me more about myself and focused on me not being from the area. He knew I wasn't because he saw my car out front and noticed the plates were out of state and kept asking me about that. He also kept shoehorning in how he was a millionaire and that I could learn a lot from him. He also kept bringing up how he figured he was one of our biggest customers since he probably spends a few $1,000s there a year just in paint. He finally decided on a paint. He went with the basic white, so no mixing, and wanted to pay in cash. He also didn't have a store account with us, nor did he want to open one, which seemed odd for a guy whose business is apparently so critical to us, and the company gave a significant discount for business accounts. He got our biggest size container, so I had to wheel it out for him. So here's where it all goes down. I bring it to the bus, and he gets it in the driver's seat and just points to the back. He expects me to load it up for him, which I granted. I normally did it for people, but company policy is we weren't supposed to, since they didn't want to be liable for us to get hurt. There's also a difference between helping a person load their trunk or truck and going up steps and into the back of the school bus. I start looking at the inside, and the steps were covered in various things, and the floor to the back was also covered in various tools and things, which just looked unsafe. But then I noticed to the left side that he had a baseball bat and a gun that his left hand is suspiciously close to. I get nervous and say, "Sorry, company policy is I'm only supposed to bring it to the parking lot, and I'm not supposed to handle it from there," and run back inside. He then sits in the bus for a bit, and I text my coworker in the back that something feels off and that if he doesn't leave, we should call the police. Well, the guy waits about 15 minutes or so and runs into the store screaming at me. He's screaming, "I'm a millionaire. Why don't you load the bus for me? I'm a millionaire. I deserve more respect than this." And I decided that the gun that was sitting on the floor of the bus was now in his jacket. I just respond with, "Company policy is that we can't load vehicles for people, and we aren't supposed to get inside them either. There were a lot of tripping hazards in there too, and it didn't feel safe." That triggers him, and he starts screaming, "I'm a millionaire. You should feel safe with me. I deserve respect." Then my coworker in the back hears them yelling and comes out and asks what's going on. The guy then immediately runs out and drives away. We call the police and they take our statements, and we start looking at the business card he gave. The name was fake. Couldn't find the business anywhere online, and the address was for a GNC in a strip mall. They get his description and the description of the bus, and they took our very grainy surveillance camera footage too, but never found him. Looking back, it definitely feels like he was going to kidnap me or just had serious issues. The company now specifically uses that scenario in training and has been on the lookout ever since. This happened back in the fall of 2016. I live in a very small and rural community where everyone knows everyone. The state that I live in allows rifle mule deer buck hunting during the first week of October. Sustenance hunting is very important in the culture of my area. This fall, I was lucky enough to have drawn a buck tag. I had made plans to hunt on my grandmother's farm on this evening. Given that I am a smaller woman, I had asked my husband to go with me in case I killed something. He could help me pack it out. However, he could not go due to work obligations. Fine, no problem. I have hunted this farm many times by myself. I know it like the back of my hand. I strapped on my boots, grabbed my rifle and binoculars, tucked my cell phone into my pocket, and made my way to my Jeep. My grandmother's farm consists of corn bordering an alfalfa field along a river. Between the river and the farm are lines of old-growth trees. This is a perfect place to fillet a buck tag. I parked my Jeep about a mile up from the fields, then began walking along the tree line towards the area where the deer had mostly been feeding. At the opposite end of the field, there is a large haystack where all of the harvested alfalfa is stored. As I saw it coming into my field of view, I felt the hairs stand on the back of my neck. I kneeled down and viewed the area through my binoculars. I could see a very tall, large man walking briskly towards me from behind the haystack. I knew for a fact that I was supposed to be the only one hunting this farm on this night, as I had just spoken with my grandmother. Something inside me told me I needed to get out of this area as fast as I could. I initially tried to turn around and walk back down the trees to my Jeep, but given that I have such short legs, this guy was quickly closing the gap quickly. He was still several hundred yards from me, so I decided to cross the river instead. I found that the river was too muddy and deep for me to safely cross. I thought my only option was to attempt to get signal on my cell phone. When he walked across a small ditch and disparaged from my line of sight, I quickly darted into the corn and kept quiet. I could hear him walking closer and closer. I desperately tried to call my husband. Back then, the closest cell towers were over 30 miles away, and cell service was extremely spotty. I could not connect to my husband or 911. By this point, the man was within 100 yards of me. I could hear him ripping corn out, stomping around and loudly cussing. "Where the fuck did you go?" Another issue, it was getting dark quickly. I definitely did not want to be in the dark alone with this man. I watched him for a few minutes and was able to determine that he did not have a gun. After weighing my options, I decided to step out and see if I could de-escalate the situation, as I work in healthcare and work with mentally unstable people all the time. I stepped out of the corn. "Hi, I'm sorry if I interrupted your hunt or something. I did not mean to cause any harm," I said, with a sweet smile on my face. I made sure there was at least 80 yards of distance between us. His eyes locked with mine, and it was obvious there was something with this man. He stood about 6'5" tall. His clothes were absolutely filthy, stained with what appeared to be his own waste and sweat. His shirt was torn and had dried blood on it. His face was crooked as if he had a stroke prior, and he slurred his words. "There you fucking are," he yelled. He reached down and grabbed a massive stick, and I'm talking a stick of at least 5 foot long. He could have easily killed me with this stick. I stood my ground and grabbed my rifle from my back and pointed it at him. He stopped holding the stick. We looked at each other for a second when he began yelling, "Did you know whose farm you're on?" I stated, "Yes, this is my grandmother's farm. I've hunted it my whole life." The veins began to pop out of his head. "No, this is not. My wife is hunting in this cornfield, and you ruined it. Because of you, she missed a huge buck, you stupid bitch." He became so enraged, he started making strange growling sounds and started spitting everywhere. I was running through the options in my head at this point when he suddenly started to lunge at me. I turned the safety off on my rifle and loudly stated, "Stop! I will shoot if I have to." He froze in his tracks and just stared at me for about 30 seconds before dropping the stick. He grunted loudly with his eyes darting around. "Listen, I don't want to have to do something we will both regret. I am very sorry I ruined your hunt. If you turn around and walk away from me, I will leave," I calmly explained. I could see he was thinking hard about what to do next when he mumbled, "Ugh, fine," and turned around, stomping back towards the haystack. My heart was about to beat out of my chest. I was not about to turn my back on this man, though. I watched until he walked distances away, and then I darted back into the corn. I thought back on how he said I spooked a massive buck and ruined his wife's hunt. But that did not make any sense. I have a good view of the whole field, and there were no deer present. I decided to observe him through my binoculars. I watched him climb up into the haystack and get into a small two-door white car. He quickly peeled out of the haystack lot. I was able to catch that the car had California license plates, but nothing more. I live nowhere near California. He took off down the road, and he was alone. No one else was in that vehicle. I ran back to my Jeep and locked myself in. I sped home as fast as I could and told my husband what had happened. I had never seen this man in my life, and neither had my husband, based off my description. We live in a community of about 200 people, born and raised here. We know everyone. I called our local sheriff, and they came out and took a statement. I took them to the haystack where he was parked, and we found a knife lying on the ground. Of course, nothing could be done as I was not able to get a plate number or a name from the man. To this day, I still have no idea what the man's intentions were, even though I could guess on a few. It's been 8 years, and I have never seen this man again. I also decided that I'd be hunting with a buddy from now on. I haven't been able to stop thinking about this incident and wanted to see if it resonates with anyone else. Me, my wife, and dog recently went to Red River Gorge, a state park in southeastern Kentucky. We're no strangers to camping in the park, having been there at least 20 times over the past 8 years. We chose a spot I've been to 2 to 3 times before. It's worth noting that this site is outside of our dispersed camping areas and is essentially the only proper spot with car parking along a 2-mile stretch of road. There's a dilapidated barn about a mile up from where we drove in, and a cemetery about 1/3 of a mile in the opposite direction. Otherwise, it's a rarely traveled road, and we saw no one all day, just an occasional car. Maybe 1 or 2 an hour. The spot is at the base of a 30-foot incline that a 4x4 could handle. Our SUV was parked horizontally at the top, blocking other vehicles from descending. From there, it's about 30 yards into the campground, with another slope leading to the river's edge and swimming hole. The day went great. We spent time near the beach letting our dog swim. Then did typical camping activities like hiking, foraging, chopping wood, throwing the hatchet, and enjoying a few beers. Once sunlight began to fade around 6:30, we started the fire and began cooking dinner. As darkness fell and the last light disappeared, we heard the usual sounds: squirrels, rustling, things falling into the leaves, which spooked my wife a bit, but we didn't think much of it. Then, at about 9 p.m., sitting around the healthy fire and listening to music, we heard heavy shuffling in the leaves. Definitely something large or heavy. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the road, about halfway between us and our car. I stopped the music, and after about 10 seconds of dead silence, we heard the shuffling again. Before I could call out, we heard this strange and unnatural noise, something like a throttling, ascending pitch, mixed with a shriek. Neither of us can verbally describe it, and I can confidently say I've never heard anything like it before. It was about 20 to 25 feet away, just outside the reach of my headlamp. Our dog went insane, hair standing on end and barking incessantly into the darkness. He was on a long lead, or I'm sure he would have taken off after it. My wife and I were frozen. I was holding my hatchet and trying to catch any movement or sound to track. After about 2 to 3 minutes of that, with no further noises, I calmed the dog and we grabbed some essentials and hurried to the car. Our adrenaline was pumping as we discussed coyotes, foxes, or other animals as the possible culprits. I didn't want to mention the possibility of people, as that would have heightened the paranoia. We eventually passed out after about an hour, but I spent the rest of the night in and out of shallow sleep, feeling very uncomfortable both mentally and physically. I've always struggled to sleep anyway, except fully horizontal. At around 3 a.m., right next to my head, I heard a singular knock on the window, like someone tapped the glass with one knuckle. My wife didn't wake up, and I scanned the outside of the car, but didn't see or hear anything. I struggled to doze off again, and my heartbeat was rapid. When we finally got the first light around 7 a.m., we cooked breakfast, packed up our campsite, and got the hell out of Dodge. No prints or anything out of sorts, with our remaining belongings either. What's strange to me is that after hearing the noise, we heard no additional heavy shuffling from the source. With our dog barking so aggressively, we should have heard whatever it was moving away. We've looked up various animal noises native to the gorge, and nothing even remotely resembles what we heard. The knock on the window was also isolated. There were no other noises or visible happenings outside the car immediately following. Lastly, I had a thought the day after we left. I remember whistling for our dog after dark, since we had some scraps to give him near the fire. Immediately I thought, shit, I shouldn't have whistled. But up until this trip, I've never been a believer in those superstitions. I just like to respect the folklore I've heard. In hindsight, we're now convinced I may have invited a Wendigo or skinwalker to our camp. I won't take those superstitions lightly again, and I'm sure this occurrence will affect at least my next few overnights in those woods. This happened about 5 years ago, after my fiance and I had been living in our house for a little over a year. I am 6 foot tall and about 225 pounds. I have always been naturally muscular and am told I have an intimidating demeanor. My fiance is 5'2" and weighs maybe 130 pounds. Tiny little thing. Our house is a bi-level home where you walk in the front door and there are 2 half staircases going up to the living room or down to the basement. The only access to our backyard is through the sliding door in the upstairs living room and down the stairs from our deck. This is important. During this time, I partied a lot, way more than I should have. I was between jobs and it was toward the end of the holidays, so my interest in finding a new job wasn't quite what it should have been. Many of these nights I was out partying. I would end up just crashing with friends, which meant my fiance spent many nights alone with our 3 dogs. I had a serious problem with substance abuse, primarily alcohol, and I'm sad to say I was letting it get the better of me. Fast forward a couple of months and I had just found a new job that had random drug and alcohol testing. A godsend in hindsight. I had been sober all of 2 days and had begun repairing my relationship with my fiance when she told me how glad she was that I was sleeping at home again. I thought nothing of it and kissed her on the head and told her I was too and that I loved her. Late that night, my fiance and I were watching TV downstairs when I thought I heard something moving in our backyard. The dogs heard it too, but I dismissed it because they just perked up their ears, but didn't seem too alarmed. A moment later, I hear the noise again, and my fiance very quickly mutes the TV and gives me a very nervous look. "Did you hear that?" she asked, looking very uncomfortable. I told her it's probably just a few of the neighborhood cats playing in our bushes, as there are quite a few outdoor cats living in the area. But she shook her head and began insisting that this wasn't the case. Before I could even ask her what made her so sure, I hear our sliding glass door upstairs fly open. All three of my Great Danes and myself are on our feet in an instant. The dogs let out the most ferocious sounding barks I have ever heard and tore ass up the stairs with me right behind them. As I'm rounding the first set of stairs and the dogs are reaching the top of the second set, I see the sliding door slam closed and the silhouette of a man running away. I get to the door and fling it open, and the dogs shove me out of the way to chase after this would-be intruder. I grab my flashlight, one of those big 40 cell mag lights that cops carry, and run out into the yard. I had just made it down the deck stairs when I see the dogs freaking out at the back fence. I sprint over and jump the fence, just in time to see the man reaching the opposite fence and trying to get over it. He was covered head to toe in black clothing, a thick black hoodie with the hood pulled tight to conceal his face, and jet black cargo pants. Without any regard for my personal safety, I charge the man and just barely miss getting a hold of him as he makes it over the fence. Once more, I follow him over and come around to the front of my neighbor's house just in time to see him hop into an old beaten-up pickup and speed off. I watch for a moment as he tears out of the neighborhood and disappears into the night. I run back home as fast as I can to check on my fiance and make sure she's okay. When I walked into the house, she was sitting in the upstairs living room, surrounded by all three of our Great Danes and clutching the biggest knife we own. She was visibly shaken, but ultimately she was a very strong woman and told me she was ready in case I got into trouble. After calling the cops, giving statements, and triple checking to make sure every door and window in the house was locked up tight, we decided to watch another movie, as neither of us were tired after the adrenaline rush we had just been through. During the movie, I asked her what made her so sure before that it wasn't just cats playing in the yard. What she told me was enough for me to decide it was time to change my whole life. She said that for about a month now, she's been hearing strange noises coming from all around the house late at night. She would hear footsteps outside and occasionally what sounded like whispering. When I asked her why she never told me, she just shook her head and said she didn't know. After hearing this, I came to the realization that whoever this man was, he knew that I was never home at night, and that my fiance essentially was all alone most of the time. Fortunately for us, he somehow missed the fact that we have three Great Danes, and for whatever reason, on this night, he decided not to check and make sure she was alone again. Since that day, I've been 100% sober from everything. 5 years total as of March 1st. Woohoo! And have not left my fiance alone overnight since. Our relationship has never been stronger, and our three Great Danes are three of the best dogs anyone could ask for. In the end, this experience has changed my life completely, for the better. But creepy, wannabe, rapist, burglar, whatever you are, let's not meet for your sake. And that, your embers, brings a close to these A True Scary collection. Before I end this video, I would like to acknowledge the other members of the channel. Thank you all so much, as you are the glue that holds this channel together. And for everyone else, the coffee crew, the first timers, and the peekaboos, thank you so much for your support. I can't thank you enough, for without you, I would not have a voice and there would not be a Back to Ashes. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Until next time, please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.